Imagine trying to understand a country of over 1 billion people. You've got this staggering diversity of cultures, languages, and histories, and it's all bound together by one single rulebook. Well, today, we are unboxing the foundational DNA of India, the preamble to its constitution. Let's dive right into this explainer and see exactly what makes the world's largest democracy tick. So, if you had to read the entire Constitution of India, you'd be staring down a massive document with over 146,000 words. Where do you even begin with something like that? Well, the eminent jurist N.A. Palkhivala offered a pretty brilliant metaphor. He actually called the preamble the identity card of the Constitution. It's the preface, the introduction, basically the very essence of the entire document condensed down onto one single, powerful page.
And here is our game plan for today. We're going to look at the Constitution's identity card, break down the ingredients of the preamble, decode those key words, explore why it's considered the soul of the Constitution, and finally, get into the Supreme Court battles surrounding it.
All right, kicking things off with Part 1, the Constitution's identity card and its origins. What's really fascinating here is the history behind all of this. This beautifully packaged text didn't just magically appear out of nowhere. It's actually derived from what was called the Objectives Resolution. This was drafted and moved by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and the Constituent Assembly unanimously adopted it way back on January 22, 1947. That resolution shaped the entire Constitution, and its modified version, that's what we read as the preamble today. Moving right along to Section 2, the ingredients of the preamble. This is basically the blueprint.
If you treat the preamble like a brand new piece of tech, these are its 4 core hardware specifications. First, the source of authority. It clearly states that the Constitution gets its power directly from the people of India. Second, the nature of the Indian state. It declares exactly what kind of country India is. Third, the objectives. What does the Constitution actually want to achieve for its citizens? And finally, the date of adoption, officially stamping November 26, 1949 as the day it all started. So it neatly maps out who holds the power, what the nation is, the goals it's striving for, and the official launch date.
Okay, Section 3, decoding the key words. These are the heavy hitters, and we're going to rapid-fire decode these political science terms one by one.
First up on the list is sovereign. Now, it's absolutely crucial to realize this means complete, absolute independence. India isn't a dependency or a dominion of any other nation. There's literally no higher authority above it. And this perfectly illustrates that even though India chose to stay in the Commonwealth or, holds a seat at the United Nations, those international ties do not limit its supreme sovereign power to run its own internal and external affairs. Nobody else is pulling the strings.
Next, we have secular and socialist. And get this, these two powerful words weren't even in the original 1949 preamble. No way, right? They were actually added later by the 42nd Amendment Act in 1976. The Indian concept of secularism is super unique because it's a positive concept. It doesn't mean a strict wall between church and state like you see in the West. Instead, it means giving equal respect and equal support to all religions. As for socialist, we're talking about democratic socialism here. The goal is ending poverty, ignorance, and inequality of opportunity. Building on that, we hit the concept of a democratic republic. The term democratic means the supreme power actually rests with the people, exercised through voting in periodic elections. So it's an indirect, representative, parliamentary democracy. Now combine that with republic. This ensures the head of the state, the president, is elected. It's not hereditary. That guarantees there's no privileged elite class, and public offices are open to every single citizen. Literally, no kings, no queens, just representatives chosen by the people. And then we have the grand objectives. Trust me, these aren't just fancy vocabulary words, they are the actual deliverables. Justice covers social, economic, and political fairness, and that was actually inspired by the 1917 Russian Revolution. Liberty ensures freedoms of thought, expression, and worship, while equality makes sure there are no special privileges for anyone. Those two, along with fraternity, which is this sense of brotherhood assuring human dignity and national unity, were heavily inspired by the French Revolution. So they basically drew on the world's greatest historical movements to guarantee the daily freedoms we have today.
Let's shift gears for a second into Section 4, the soul of the Constitution and its true significance. Because beyond all these legal definitions, there's a deep emotional weight here.
The Founding Fathers definitely didn't just see this as some dry legal prologue. Constituent Assembly member Pandit Thakur Das Bhargava literally called it the most precious part of the Constitution and, I quote, the soul of the Constitution. Other framers called it the horoscope of our sovereign democratic republic. They viewed it as a jewel, a yardstick to measure the worth of the entire document. It really is this solemn resolve that represents all the dreams and aspirations of a newly independent nation.
Which naturally brings us to a very dramatic question in Section 5, the Supreme Court battles. Because if it's the soul of the country, does it actually hold legal weight in a courtroom? Is it legally a part of the Constitution?
We actually had a massive legal flip-flop on this. Back in the 1960 Berubari Union case, the Supreme Court basically said, yes, it's significant, but officially not a part of the Constitution. But fast forward to the landmark 1973 Kesavananda Bharti case, and the court totally rejected its own earlier opinion. They looked back at the history and realized, wait, the Constituent Assembly formally enacted the preamble, just like the rest of the document. So in 1973, they firmly established that yes, it is an integral part of the Constitution.
But wait, there is a catch. A big one, actually. Even though it is officially part of the Constitution, it is what's called non-justiciable, meaning you can't just walk into a courtroom and sue the government solely because you feel the preamble was violated. It doesn't give the legislature new powers, and it doesn't stop them from doing things. Instead, it's a guiding light. Courts use it to interpret tricky, ambiguous laws and to figure out what the framers originally intended, but it is not a strict, enforceable penal code on its own.
So you might be wondering, can this identity card ever be changed? Let's look at the timeline. In 1949, it was actually adopted at the very end of the drafting process to make sure it aligned perfectly with the rest of the text. Then, in 1973, alongside ruling that it was part of the Constitution, that Kesavananda Bharti case settled the whole amendability question. The court said yes, Parliament can amend the preamble, but, and this is a huge but, they cannot destroy or alter its basic features. The fundamental DNA of the nation is completely protected. And shortly after that, in 1976, it got its first and only amendment, adding the words socialist, secular, and integrity.
So we've unboxed the blueprint, decoded the heavy terminology, and waded through the Supreme Court drama. This one single page really does capture the philosophy, the struggles, and the massive aspirations of an entire democracy. But as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with something to really think about. If the preamble is India's national identity card, its absolute foundational DNA, as a modern society today, are we truly living up to those massive promises of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity?